The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is frequently touted in top 10 lists as one of the greatest games of all time, and with good reason. This was hardly one of the first 3D games, but it was one of the earliest to absolutely nail what it set out to do. A major contributor to this is that the existing top-down Zelda experiences like A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening were already halfway to realizing 3D exploration, thanks to their sprawling maps and 4-dimensional RPG-esque movement. With this central gameplay formula, one could make the case that Zelda would have, at the time, been one of the easier major franchises to transition into this new dimension. While that's true, it didn't stop Nintendo from going above and beyond a straight adaptation to 3D. Before I explain why, however, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications every time that I upload, leave a like, and comment any and all suggestions for how to improve my content going forward. Let's get into it. Our story begins in the whimsical Kokiri Forest, a clearing in a densely wooded region which serves as the home of the Kokiri, an elf-like race who remain as children perpetually. Every citizen of this forest has their own personal fairy companion, except for our protagonist Link. That changes when the forest's guardian, the Great Deku Tree, sends the ever-annoying Navi to berate him until he wakes up and then take him on an epic quest. When comparing the opening of this game to that of something like Link to the Past, it feels far more in line with a movie or a novel. Rather than opening with a definitive call to action, there's a healthy dose of time spent in the Kokiri Forest with characters like Saria, Mido, and of course the Great Deku Tree, all of whom Link has grown up with. Compare that to Link to the Past's psychic dream message from a captive Zelda and a dead uncle in the first few minutes, and it becomes apparent that Ocarina is striving for a more mature approach at world building and creating connections so events down the line will actually resonate a lot more. The Kokiri Forest and Great Deku Tree serve as an equally informative and subtle tutorial to the newly 3D-ified Zelda conventions of exploration, combat, questing, and dungeoning. But this extends even further with the next 2/3 of the child sequence gradually taking off the training wheels one at a time. By the time the adult sequence kicks off, you've spent enough time immersed in the charming cultures and customs of Hyrule for what follows to feel like a legitimately crushing blow, and a sobering call to defeat Ganondorf. Even amid these insurmountable and almost hopeless circumstances, there's a beautiful message that it's never too late to redeem a world shrouded in darkness. This is nothing new to fiction, but this is one of the earliest and best depictions of this within a game, a medium where the consumer actively participates in changing the outcome of the narrative. That's why Ocarina's story works so well, not in spite of its conventional plot structure, but because of it. Another major component of this greatness is the emphasis on character. As I'll get into, the sprawling world of this game is incredible, but without charming NPCs, it wouldn't be anywhere near as brilliant. Every significant character that you come across is a colourful and well-realised individual. Hell, that even goes for despicable ones like Ingo, who have this twisted charm to them. This is prominently owed to the side quests. Sometimes in RPG-inspired games, extracting hints or items from characters can feel more transactional than enjoyable. But here that never feels like the case, because they feel and speak like actual people. The fact that you receive items and incentives for talking to them is the main draw, but their dialogue and personality is the cherry on top. And it only helps that the side questing elements are just as sophisticated, if not more so, than they were in Link to the Past. You have so many iconic side quests which bring a variety of optional content to engage with during the main story. The world isn't just teeming with boxes to tick, but rather the game encourages deviation from the main quest with a diverse array of side quests to be enjoyed just for the sake of enjoyment, and then also gives you a collectible without ever making it feel tedious. But on the subject of tedium, there are some stray, outdated features here and there which really can hamper pacing. The equipping of items and gear in particular sticks out. Maybe it's because my first experience with Ocarina of Time was playing the incredibly well-polished and I'm sure this isn't all that controversial, superior 3DS remake, but something about the menus and interface here just feels archaic. In the 3DS version, not only did you have an extra slot to store items, but you could register both items and gear. That might not seem huge, but in places like the Water Temple, which rely on constant equipping and de-equipping of the iron boots, repeatedly pausing, scrolling to the gear menu, and doing so makes the whole affair feel really disjointed. It also doesn't help that the Switch port for some reason doesn't let you use a directional D-pad like the N64 original. Now, when you equip an item or play the ocarina, there's a constant dread that you'll tilt the stick in the wrong direction. In the best case, messing up the last note of a song, and in the worst, accidentally releasing a fairy or wasting a potion. Another gripe I have is the text speed. This was a pretty common Zelda quirk at the time, but thankfully over the past decade or so, it's been fixed. In Ocarina of Time, the text crawls at a preposterously slow pace. It's kind of like back in school when teachers would always call on that one dyslexic kid to read, and the kid was clearly uncomfortable, and the whole class just wanted it to end because everyone felt really bad and gross. That's what the text speed of Ocarina of Time is. Sometimes if there's a long wall of text, you can skip it with the B button, but it literally races by at warp speed. Like, where's the option for someone who still wants to read the text, but doesn't want to do so at a snail's pace? And don't get me started on Navi, because every time she speaks, I feel like assaulting a cuckoo and just praying for the end. On the subject of avian annoyances, I'm sure I'm not the only one that finds Kapora Gabora really irksome. His monologues are ridiculously long, and even though you can skip them, you really shouldn't because they're genuinely helpful. Because of this, I just find him really pompous, and something about a small boy hitching a ride down the mountain from an old man who turns into an owl never really sat right with me. Another area where I think the 3DS remake excels is the inclusion of the Sheikah Stones, which would give the option for younger or new players to get a clue as to what they should do next without spelling it out explicitly. Playing the N64 version, I can absolutely see why this was a change for the better, because let's be honest, the hints for what to do next aren't always the most helpful here. But enough negativity, because ultimately Ocarina of Time does exceedingly more right than it does wrong. Despite what I said earlier about Zelda being comparatively easier than many franchises to transition into 3D, there was still a lot the devs needed to rethink so they could overcome significant challenges. But from that struggle emerged some of the most sophisticated and revolutionary, yet approachable mechanics the series had ever seen. The Z targeting system is the main example of this, inspired by, of all things, a play about Ninja. Seriously, Google it, awesome story. This combat system allows Link to circle his enemies horizontally and wait for the right time to strike. The fact that it's been retained and built upon in every successive 3D Zelda is a testament to just how genius it is. Other items such as the bow, boomerang, and hookshot, which are based around aiming, were similarly revolutionized here. Not only can you opt for the first-person aiming of the era's shooter games, but you can even use Z targeting while aiming to lock onto the enemy and attack from a distance. This might sound like it makes things too easy, but there's still plenty of minigames and collectibles that demand proficiency with aiming without the use of Z targeting. These were tricky for me because Ocarina of Time features an inverted Y-axis for aiming, unfortunately with no option to change it, but I eventually adjusted. The dungeons were also no doubt challenging to transition into 3D. While this often results in more linear design regarding the order in which you obtain keys and explore, Ocarina of Time more than compensates, with excellent puzzles, combat challenges, and distinctive environmental themes in all its dungeons. There's also a more realized potential for verticality here, with the previously mentioned aiming adding another layer of problem solving. The way that most dungeons feature a large central chamber linking rooms together helps to keep things simple. But the best thing is that these are usually one of the first rooms you'll enter, and yet often the puzzle you need to reach the dungeon's boss or the next major area is located in plain sight within these. Often you either just lack the understanding and the items needed to reach it. Brilliant. You also have uniquely thrilling concepts like incorporating the central time travel mechanic into the Spirit Temple, the spiraling vertical trunk of the Great Deku Tree, and the raising and lowering of the water level in the Water Temple. And just for the record, the fourth time through, the Water Temple is one of my favorites. Whilst going in blind absolutely sucks, I think I finally appreciate the brilliance behind the water level concept and how it affects progression. The bosses and mini-bosses here are excellent for the most part, with maybe the exception of Shadow Link, who really does just thrive off his iconic reflective chamber and status as evil edgy Link, despite his fight being mechanically pretty straightforward but simultaneously really damned frustrating. The dungeons are a lot of fun, but when you add the overworld into the mix, it's not even fair how good this game is. The villages, towns, and various branching paths are so much fun to interact with and uncover secrets in. Even more so now that the NPCs feel more alive in 3D. The biggest accomplishment for the time, however, is the scope of Hyrule Field. It's absolutely massive, and there's a respectable amount of secrets to find around it. Whilst it hasn't aged incredibly and seems a little barren by today's standards, the fact that it even existed was a huge step forward for open world design. And this was only made better with the introduction of Epona, Link's trusty horse who carries him around this mammoth map at much greater speeds. Before you get Epona, your only means to speed up traversal is the dreaded roll. This is one of my least favourite additions, and I'm glad that Skyward Sword replaced it with stamina wheel running. Not only is spamming the A button over and over to go slightly faster a pain, but Link noisily shouts every time you perform the roll. Every 2 seconds if you're anything like me, and that's sure to lead to a headache or two. I love the visual presentation of these different areas though, and places like Hyrule Field, which feature a moving day and night cycle, really highlight the gorgeous lighting this game employs. Whether day, night, dawn, or dusk, every area always has an intriguing vibe and it's a blast to move through. While the polygonal look of just about any N64 game will never exactly age well, I've got to say that Ocarina choosing a more realistic and natural color palette with sparse use of vibrant colors has helped it to still evoke the intended mood all this time later. If there's one aspect of this game which has only improved with age, it's absolutely the soundtrack. For anybody who's ever touched this game, myself included, every single track here evokes a warm and fuzzy feeling, like you've just come home after a long trip, and as the game progresses, tracks like that of Gerudo Valley ensure the audio elements stay just as central to Ocarina of Time's grand scope as the gameplay and visuals do. Also on music, the choice to center the playable ocarina as a gameplay mechanic weaves music into the very heart of this game. Not only does this expand the variety of gameplay experiences significantly, bringing new dimensions to puzzle solving, but the compositional mastery that went into creating these tracks can't be understated. The sweeping and layered version of each song that plays after you play the central motif brings waves of emotion. But boiling these down to simplistic 6-note motifs to be memorized and played at a moment's notice ensures that the mechanic is never too complicated, but also rewards players with the chance to participate in some incredible compositions. When you take a step back and look at all these intersecting ideas, the diverse types of gameplay on offer, the masterfully designed world, the endearing denizens of said world, and the immaculate degree of polish, especially for a game which features such unprecedented depth, it's impossible to deny just how legendary this game is. Not only did it help to drag action-adventure games into the 21st century, but it also managed to stand tall as one of the greatest artistic triumphs of all time in its own right. And despite occasional flaws as a result of aging, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time still reserves its spot as a 9.5 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video very much. If you did, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications every time that I upload, leave a like, and comment any and all suggestions on how to improve my reviews going forward. If you didn't, then screw you, piss off, go away, blah blah blah, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good one.